I discovered my company has been paying the new hire $15K more than me for the same job. The printer jammed at exactly the wrong moment. I was standing there in the empty break room at 6:47 a.m., watching the machine chew up what I thought was my quarterly review summary, when a different document slid out instead. It was a salary confirmation letter. For Derek Thornton, the new hire who'd started 3 months ago, the kid I'd been training, the one who kept asking me how to run reports I could do in my sleep. His starting salary was $127,000. I was making $112,000. Same title, same department, same job description word for word. I read it 5 times while my coffee went cold in my hand. Then I folded it carefully, slid it into my laptop bag, and walked back to my desk like my entire understanding of the last 8 years hadn't just detonated. I'd been a financial analyst at CorePath Industries since 2016. Started at $73,000, worked my way up through merit raises and exactly one. Promotion that came with a title change, but only a $8,000 bump. I'd never complained, never rocked the boat. When they needed someone to stay late for audit season, I stayed. When they needed someone to train new hires, I trained them. I'd watched colleagues leave for better offers and convinced myself that loyalty mattered, that stability was worth something, that my steady performance reviews always exceeds expectations meant I was valued. The company had survived the pandemic, kept us employed when other firms were laying people off. I'd felt grateful. I'd felt secure. That security was a lie printed on 20-pound paper. Derek Thornton was 26, fresh MBA from a decent but not prestigious program. Nice enough guy, eager to learn, but he'd never worked in financial analysis before CorePath. I'd spent 6 weeks walking him through our systems, teaching him the shortcuts I'd developed, explaining client relationships that took years to build. He'd thanked me, earnestly, bought me coffee twice, asked smart questions. I'd liked him. Now I was staring at my monitor, pretending to review an expense report, while my brain tried to reconcile the math. $15,000. That was a car payment. That was a vacation. That was my daughter's summer camp and my son's orthodontist bills combined. That was the raise I'd been promised 3 years ago that never came because of budget constraints. I opened my email and searched for my own offer letter from 8 years ago. Found it. Scanned to the salary line. $73,000. Derek's starting salary was $127,000. I couldn't focus. Every calculation I tried to run turned into mental subtraction. 8 years of raises adding up to $39,000. Derek's starting salary already $15,000 higher than my current pay. When you factored in the compounding effect of raises being percentages of base salary, I'd need another decade to catch up, assuming we got identical raises going forward, which we obviously wouldn't, because his base was higher. My annual review was in 3 weeks. I'd been planning to ask for $8,000 more, bringing me to $120,000. Now that number felt insulting. I should be at $135,000 minimum, probably $140,000 if we were being honest about market rate and experience. My hands were shaking. I closed my laptop and went to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and texted my wife. We need to talk tonight. Something happened at work. I'm okay, but I'm not okay. By lunchtime, I'd made a decision. I took the document to FedEx office during my lunch break and made 3 copies. Paid cash, put the original back in my bag, slid 1 copy into my car's glove compartment, left 1 in my desk at home, and kept 1 in my wallet. I wasn't sure what I was preparing for, but I knew evidence had a way of disappearing in corporate environments. When I got back to the office, Derek was at his desk, humming while he typed, completely unaware that I now knew exactly what he was worth to. Our employer versus what I was worth. I felt sick. Not angry at him, he didn't set his salary. Angry at the system. At my manager, Kent Ashford, who'd told me last year that my raise was very competitive, at 2.8%. At HR Director Pauline Frost, who'd smiled sympathetically when I'd asked about promotion tracks and said they were evaluating structures. All of it was bullshit. That afternoon, I started pulling threads I should have pulled years ago. I logged into the company's internal job posting system and searched historical listings. Found the analyst position posting from Derek's hiring period. Requirements: bachelor's degree in finance or related field, 0 to 3 years experience preferred, proficiency in Excel and financial modeling software. Salary range listed as competitive. I pulled my own job description from the employee portal. Identical. Word for word. Same responsibilities, same required skills, same reporting structure. The only difference was that I'd been performing those duties for 8 years while Derek was learning them for 3 months. I screenshot everything and emailed it to my personal account using my phone's hotspot so it wouldn't go through company servers. Then I searched for other analyst postings from the past 3 years. Every single one had the same requirements. Every single one was hiring people at salaries higher than what they were paying existing employees to do the exact same work. I couldn't eat dinner that night. Rachel noticed immediately. You said you'd tell me what happened, so tell me. We were sitting at the kitchen table after the kids had gone to bed. I pulled out my laptop and showed her everything. The salary letter. The spreadsheet comparing my 8 years of raises to Derek's starting salary. The job descriptions proving we did identical work. She stared at the screen for a long time. This is illegal, isn't it? She finally said. I don't know, I admitted. But it's definitely wrong. They've Been systematically underpaying people who've been loyal to them. They're betting we won't notice or won't care enough to do anything about it. Rachel's jaw tightened. She'd worked in HR for 10 years before staying home with the kids. She understood compensation structures. This is deliberate, she said. This isn't an oversight or a budget issue. They're exploiting the fact that people don't talk about salary. They're counting on your politeness to save them money. She looked at me directly. What are you going to do? I didn't hesitate. I'm going to make them explain it. And if they can't, I'm going to make them fix it. The next day, I started building my case with obsessive detail. I created a timeline of every major project I'd handled since 2016. The Riverside property audit that saved the company $340,000. The Morrison account rescue in 2019 when the client was ready to walk, and I spent 3 months rebuilding trust. The analyst training program I'd developed that reduced onboarding time by 40%. Every client retention I'd secured. Every process improvement I'd implemented. Every weekend I'd worked during audit season. I attached performance metrics to each one. Conservative revenue estimates. Time saved. Costs avoided. When I tallied everything, my measurable contribution to CorePath's bottom line over 8 years exceeded $4.2 million, and they'd compensated me with raises that averaged 2.9% annually. The math was obscene. A junior analyst making $127,000 from day one, while I'd generated millions in value for $112,000 after 8 years. I saved the file as Evidence Compensation Inequity NH and backed it up to 3 different cloud services. I started documenting everything. That night, I went through 8 years of emails, found every performance review, every project I'd led, every client win I'd secured, created a spreadsheet with dates, outcomes, and the measurable value I'd brought to the company. Conservative estimates put my contribution to revenue at $2.3 million over 8 years through client retention alone. I'd saved the company $340,000 in 1 quarter by identifying a vendor billing error. I'd trained 11 analysts, 7 of whom were still with the company. On paper, I was exactly the kind of employee corporations claimed they wanted to retain. Yet somehow Derek Thornton, with 0 experience, was valued $15,000 higher on day 1. I kept thinking about the phrase, market adjustment. That's what HR always said when someone got a big raise. We're making a market adjustment. The market hadn't adjusted for me in 8 years, apparently. The market had decided I was worth less than a fresh graduate. The next morning, I started asking careful questions. I caught Jeremy Wu from accounting in the parking garage. We'd started the same year, had kids the same age, grabbed lunch sometimes. Hey, random question, you happen to know what they're starting analysts at these days? I'm trying to advise my cousin who's job hunting. Jeremy glanced around, lowered his voice. I heard 120 to 130 depending on credentials, but that's just rumor. My stomach dropped. What are you at now, if you don't mind me asking? He hesitated. 114. You? 112. We stared at each other for a long moment. How long have you been here? I asked. 8 years, he said. Same. We stood there in the concrete echo of the parking garage, 2 men simultaneously realizing we'd been systematically undervalued. We should probably talk more about this, Jeremy finally said. Yeah, I agreed. We should. By Friday, I'd quietly connected with 4 other analysts who'd been at CorePath for 5 years or more. Every single one was making between $108,000 and $116,000. Every single one had trained newer hires, and every single one had been told their raises were competitive, that the company valued loyalty, that budget constraints limited what they could do. Meanwhile, I'd confirmed, through careful conversation, that at least 3 analysts hired in the past 18 months were making between $125,000 and $132,000. The pattern was obvious. CorePath had decided it was cheaper to underpay existing employees and hoped they didn't compare notes than to bring everyone up to market rate. They were counting on our silence, our politeness, our fear of seeming ungrateful. They were counting on us not talking to each other. They'd miscalculated. I spent the weekend researching employment attorneys. Found one named Diana Kensington who specialized in wage discrimination and compensation equity cases. Her website showed a 23-year career, multiple settlements against mid-sized corporations, and a quote that resonated. Your loyalty is an asset. It should be compensated as such, not exploited as a weakness. Monday morning, I called her office. Her paralegal took my information and scheduled a consultation for the following afternoon. Bring documentation, she said. Anything showing your performance history, any communications about salary, and if you have information about comparable positions, that's helpful too. I told her I had plenty. When I hung up, my hands were steady for the first time in days. I was done being quiet. I was done being grateful for scraps. I was going to make them justify every dollar they'd withheld. The consultation was in a downtown office with a view of the river. Diana Kensington was 51, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She reviewed my documentation for 20 minutes without speaking, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Finally, she looked up. How long have you been documenting the pay disparity? 6 days, I said, since I found Derek Thornton's offer letter. She nodded slowly. And you've confirmed the pattern with other long-term employees? 4 others so far, all making significantly less than recent hires for the same positions. She tapped her pen against the pad. Here's what I'm seeing. If this is systematic style wow, if the company has a pattern of paying newer employees substantially more than tenured employees for identical work, that could constitute a violation of pay equity principles, especially if there's no legitimate business justification. The fact that you've all received positive reviews and contributed measurably makes it harder for them to argue performance differences. What are my options? I asked. Diana leaned back in her chair. You can go to HR and request a market adjustment. They'll likely refuse or offer a token increase. You can file a complaint with the State Labor Board, which takes months and has limited enforcement power. Or you can build an airtight case with me, present it to the company with the threat of legal action and public exposure, and force a settlement. The third option is riskier, but typically yields the best results. She paused. I need to be clear. If you go this route, your relationship with CorePath is effectively over. They may retaliate. They may create a hostile environment. They'll probably force you out within 6 months, even if they settle. But you'll get compensated for the years they underpaid you, and you'll potentially help your colleagues do the same. I thought about my kids, my mortgage, the stability I'd prized. Then I thought about Derek Thornton's $127,000 and my 8 years of loyalty, adding up to $112,000. Let's build the case, I said. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own office. I showed up, did my work, smiled in meetings, and collected evidence. Diana had given me a list of things she needed: detailed job descriptions, performance metrics, any communications about salary or promotion decisions, information about recent hires and their compensation, demographic data if available. I pulled job postings from CorePath's hiring site showing what they advertised for analyst positions. I screenshot LinkedIn profiles showing credentials and experience levels. I documented every project I'd led, every training I'd provided, every metric that proved I was doing senior-level work for mid-level pay. Jeremy Wu and the others were doing the same. We'd created a shared encrypted folder where we pooled information. The picture that emerged was damning. Over 3 years, CorePath had hired 16 analysts. The 8 with 5+ years experience averaged $111,000. The 8 hired within 2 years averaged $128,000. The gap was $17,000 on average, across the board. Diana requested salary data through a formal discovery letter, citing potential legal action under state wage transparency laws. CorePath's legal department stalled for a week, then provided a redacted spreadsheet that confirmed everything we suspected. There it was in black and white: systematic devaluation of tenured employees. Diana scheduled a meeting with her, me, Jeremy, and 2 other plaintiffs, Leslie Park and Chris Brennan, both 8-year veterans making less than $115,000. This is strong, Diana said, spreading the documents across her conference table. The company's own data shows a clear pattern. No performance-based justification, no role differentiation, just a deliberate choice to pay less to people they assume won't leave. Here's what I'm recommending. We send a demand letter requesting immediate market corrections, back pay for the differential, and written policy changes. We give them 10 business days to respond. If they refuse or lowball us, we file suit and go public. Chris looked nervous. What does go public mean? Media, Diana said simply. Local business press loves wage gap stories. Bad PR often motivates action faster than legal threats. The demand letter went out on a Friday afternoon. It detailed the systematic pay disparity, included anonymized data from our 5 cases, and requested that CorePath immediately adjust salaries to market rate, $135,000 minimum for senior analysts, provide back pay for the differential over the past 3 years, and implement transparent salary bands across the organization. Total demand, approximately $67,000 in back pay per person, plus ongoing corrections. We gave them until the end of the month. The following Monday morning, I was called into Kent Ashford's office. He was seated behind his desk, face flushed, with Pauline Frost from HR perched on the chair beside him. We received your attorney's letter, Kent said tightly. This is extremely disappointing, Nathan. After everything we've done for you, keeping you employed through the pandemic, providing steady raises, investing in your development, this is how you repay us? By threatening legal action? I stayed calm. I'm not threatening anything. I'm asking for fair compensation for the work I do. Pauline interjected, her voice syrupy with false concern. Nathan, you have to understand that compensation is complex. Market rates fluctuate. New hires often require higher starting salaries to attract talent. That doesn't diminish your value to us. I looked at her steadily. Then bring my salary up to match the market rate. If Derek Thornton is worth $127, I should be worth at least $140 given my experience and performance record. Kent shook his head. It doesn't work that way. We have budget constraints. We can't just give everyone massive raises because they're unhappy. I'm not unhappy, I said. I'm underpaid. There's a difference. And I'm not alone. You've systematically devalued every analyst who's been here more than 5 years. Your own salary data proves it. The room went silent. Pauline's expression hardened. I think this conversation is over. We'll respond to your attorney through appropriate channels. In the meantime, I expect you to maintain professional conduct and not discuss your legal matters with other employees. I stood. I'll discuss whatever I want on my own time, I said. and walked out. The retaliation started within days. Suddenly, my project assignments were being reassigned to Derek and other junior analysts. Meetings I'd always attended were scheduled without me. Kent stopped responding to my emails. When I asked why I'd been removed from the client advisory board, he claimed it was a restructuring decision, with no explanation. My annual review, originally scheduled for March 14th, was abruptly postponed, pending organizational changes. It was textbook retaliation, and Diana told me to document every single instance. "They're building a case to fire you," she said. "They'll claim performance issues or redundancy. We need evidence that this started the moment you asked for fair pay." I kept a detailed log with dates, times, and witnesses. Jeremy, Leslie, and Chris were experiencing similar treatment. The message was clear: challenge us, and we'll make your life miserable until you quit. On April 3rd, CorePath's legal counsel sent a response to Diana's demand letter. It was 8 pages of corporate doublespeak that boiled down to, "We deny any wrongdoing, our compensation practices are legal and appropriate, and your clients are free to seek employment elsewhere if dissatisfied." They offered a one-time market adjustment of $3,000 each with no admission of underpayment. Diana called me at home that evening. "It's insulting, but expected. They think you'll take the crumbs and go away. Here's where we are. We can accept this, and you pocket $3,000, or we file suit and fight. If we fight, it gets public, it gets expensive, and there's no guarantee we win. Though I think we have a strong case. It's your call." I thought about my kids in the next room doing homework, thought about the mortgage, the bills, the practical realities. Then I thought about 8 years of being told I was valued while being systematically underpaid. "File the suit," I said. "I want them to justify every dollar in open court." The lawsuit was filed on April 10th, naming CorePath Industries and naming Kent, Ashford, and Pauline Frost personally for their roles in the compensation decisions. We filed under state wage discrimination statutes and included detailed documentation showing the systematic pay gap. Diana held a press conference the same day with me, Jeremy, Leslie, and Chris standing behind her. CorePath Industries has engaged in a deliberate practice of underpaying experienced analysts while hiring new employees at significantly higher salaries, she told the assembled reporters. These employees, all with 8 years of excellent performance, are making an average of $17,000 less than colleagues hired within the past 2 years for identical positions. When they asked for fair compensation, they were retaliated against. Today, we're demanding accountability. The story ran that night on 3 local news stations and hit the business section of the regional paper the next morning. My phone started ringing before 7 a.m. The media attention was intense and immediate. A business reporter from the Tribune called me directly. "Mr. Hollis, can you walk me through what made you realize you were being underpaid?" I told her about finding Derek's offer letter, about discovering the pattern, about being promised competitive raises that were anything but. She asked about the retaliation. I described the sudden project reassignments, the excluded meetings, the postponed review. "And CorePath's response?" she asked. "They offered $3,000 and told us to be grateful," I said. The article ran 2 days later under the headline, "Long-Term Employees Accuse CorePath Industries of Systematic Wage Suppression." It quoted Diana extensively, included our salary data in chart form, and featured a response from CorePath's PR team that was pure deflection. "We value all employees and maintain competitive compensation practices. These allegations are without merit, and we will defend ourselves vigorously." Inside CorePath, chaos erupted. Analysts from other departments started comparing notes. People who'd never questioned their salaries suddenly were. The company-wide meeting scheduled for the following Monday was packed. CEO Richard Carmichael stood at the podium looking cornered. "I want to address the recent media attention regarding compensation," he said stiffly. "CorePath has always maintained fair and competitive pay scales. The allegations in this lawsuit are misleading. Salary decisions are made based on multiple factors including market conditions, role requirements, and individual performance. We stand by our practices." Someone in the back I couldn't see who shouted, "Then why are new hires making 20% more than people who've been here a decade?" Richard's face reddened. "That's an oversimplification. I'm not going to discuss specific personnel matters in this forum." The meeting dissolved into tense murmuring. As we filed out, I heard at least 6 separate conversations about salary comparison. What happened next surprised everyone. 3 analysts from the investment division, people I'd never spoken to about compensation, filed their own complaints with the State Labor Board within a week of our press conference. Then 2 from risk management. Then someone from the compliance team who'd been with CorePath for 11 years and discovered she was making $23,000 less than a compliance officer hired 6 months earlier. The floodgates opened. By early May, 14 separate employees had either joined our lawsuit or filed independent complaints. Diana's firm couldn't handle them all, so she referred 7 to colleague firms with similar specialties. The legal assault on CorePath became multi-fronted. They were defending against wage discrimination claims from 4 different law firms simultaneously. Their legal costs had to be astronomical, and the PR damage was compounding daily. Local business school professors started using CorePath as a case study in what not to do. Recruitment ground to a halt. Two clients pulled contracts citing ethical concerns about corporate practices. The internal dynamics became surreal. Management tried to maintain normalcy while the company was obviously hemorrhaging credibility. They sent around memos about focusing on our work and not being distracted by external noise. They organized a forced team-building exercise, a catered lunch with motivational speakers that felt like a wake. I sat at a table with 5 colleagues, picking at pasta salad, while a consultant told us about the importance of company culture and mutual respect. The irony was physically painful. Afterwards, one of the newer analysts, a woman named Gabrielle Chen, who'd started 8 months earlier, approached me in the hallway. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "When they hired me, the recruiter told me my starting salary was $135. I thought that was standard. I had no idea. They were paying people who'd been here for years so much less. I feel sick about it." I shook my head. "It's not your fault. You didn't create the system." She looked miserable anyway. "I'm quitting. I can't work somewhere that operates like this. I'm sorry it took your lawsuit for me to realize what kind of company this was." The depositions continued through summer. Diana deposed the head of recruitment, who admitted under questioning that hiring managers were explicitly told to offer market-rate salaries to new hires, while HR was instructed to keep internal raises to minimal percentages. She deposed the CFO, who claimed ignorance about the compensation gap despite having personally approved the salary budget for 3 consecutive years. She deposed Kent Ashford, who tried to claim that performance differences justified the pay gap, then couldn't explain why my performance reviews consistently rated higher than Derek's. Each deposition added layers to our case. By August, Diana had testimony from 12 CorePath employees and executives, nearly all of it supporting our central claim. The company had knowingly, deliberately created a 2-tier system where loyalty was punished and turnover was rewarded. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't market forces. It was policy. The discovery phase was brutal. CorePath's attorneys fought to limit what data we could access, but the judge sided with us on most requests. We got complete salary histories for all analysts over a 5-year period. We got emails between HR and department heads discussing compensation strategy. We got performance review summaries showing that tenured employees consistently scored higher than new hires. The emails were particularly damning. In one exchange from 18 months earlier, Pauline Frost wrote to Kent Ashford, "We can bring in fresh talent at market rate and avoid the cost of bringing existing staff up. Most won't leave they're comfortable and risk-averse. Recommend we hold the line. On internal raises." Kent's response, "Agreed. Let's target 2.5% annually for retention and 130K for new hires. Maintains our margins." Diana highlighted that email in neon yellow. "This," she said, "is what wins cases. Direct evidence of intentional wage suppression." By June, we had enough ammunition to prove systematic devaluation beyond any reasonable doubt. The psychological toll was worse than I'd anticipated. I started having stress dreams about salary negotiations, about standing in front of executives who laughed when I asked for fair pay. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, mentally rehearsing arguments I might need to make in court. Rachel found me one night sitting at the kitchen table staring at spreadsheets at 2:47 a.m. "You need to sleep," she said gently. "I need to make sure we don't miss anything," I replied. She sat down across from me. "You've already won. You know that, right? Even if the lawsuit falls apart tomorrow, you've already proven they were wrong. You've already changed things. The rest is just making them pay for it." She was right, but it didn't stop the anxiety. I was challenging a system that had worked perfectly for CorePath for years. They had corporate attorneys, unlimited resources, and every incentive to crush us as an example. We had truth and documentation, and the desperate hope that justice actually mattered. Diana scheduled a deposition with Richard Carmichael himself for late June. The CEO had been avoiding direct involvement, letting his attorneys and HR handle everything. But Diana wanted him on record. The deposition was held in CorePath's own conference room. Neutral ground would have been preferable, but Carmichael refused to travel. He sat at the head of the table in a $3,000 suit, radiating controlled hostility. Diana started with softballs. How long had he been CEO? What was his compensation philosophy? How did CorePath determine salary ranges? Carmichael gave polished, practiced answers. Then Diana changed direction. "Mr. Carmichael, are you aware that analysts with 8 years of experience at your company make an average of $17,000 less than analysts hired within the past 2 years?" He hesitated. "I'm aware there are some variations in compensation based on market conditions and individual circumstances." Diana slid a document across the table. "This is your company's own salary data showing systematic pay disparity, not variations, a pattern. Can you explain the business justification for paying experienced employees significantly less than new hires for identical work?" Carmichael's composure cracked slightly. "We pay competitive rates based on what's necessary to attract and retain talent. Sometimes the market requires higher starting salaries. That doesn't mean existing employees are undervalued." Diana leaned forward. "So loyalty is worth less than newness at CorePath?" He bristled. "That's a mischaracterization." "Is it? Because your HR director, under oath, admitted that internal raises were deliberately kept low to fund higher salaries for new hires. She used the phrase cost containment. What did you understand that to mean? Carmichael looked at his attorney, who shook his head slightly. Don't answer. But Carmichael's ego overrode caution. We make strategic decisions to balance multiple priorities. If employees feel they're not being compensated fairly, they're free to seek opportunities elsewhere. Diana smiled. So your position is that 8 years of loyalty, excellent performance, and measurable contribution should result in those employees quitting if they want fair pay? Carmichael realized his mistake too late. That's not what I meant, but it's what you said, and it's what your company practiced. No further questions. The deposition transcript became the centerpiece of our case. Diana filed it as Exhibit R with a motion for summary judgment, arguing that CorePath's own CEO had admitted on record that the company deliberately paid experienced employees less than market rate while bringing in new hires at premium salaries. The judge didn't grant summary judgment. Corporate cases rarely ended that cleanly. But she did note in her written opinion that plaintiff's evidence demonstrates a troubling pattern of compensation practices that merit full examination at trial. Trial was scheduled for September. CorePath's legal team immediately filed for continuance, requesting a delay until January to adequately prepare their defense. Diana opposed it. The judge split the difference. Trial would begin in November. That gave us 5 months to prepare, and CorePath 5 months to panic about public trial proceedings. The company started bleeding employees. 2 senior analysts quit in May, citing the pay disparity. 3 more left in June. Derek Thornton, ironically, gave notice in early July. Apparently uncomfortable with the attention and the ethics of the situation. Exit interviews leaked to our legal team showed a pattern. People were leaving because they'd lost trust in leadership. The company's reputation in the industry took a nosedive. Recruitment became difficult. In a regional business poll, CorePath ranked as the 3rd worst employer for compensation transparency. Richard Carmichael tried to stem the damage with an internal memo promising a comprehensive compensation review, but offering no specifics or timeline. It fooled no one. By August, our legal team estimated the company had lost over $200,000 in recruitment and training costs from turnover directly related to the lawsuit. Diana filed an amended complaint documenting the business impact as evidence of systematic failure. My own situation deteriorated predictably. In late May, I was put on a performance improvement plan, citing vague issues with communication and team collaboration. The PIP was a joke, 30 days to improve metrics that were deliberately vague and impossible to measure. Diana told me to comply fully and document everything. I did. Sent daily updates to Kent showing completed tasks, included my colleagues in all communications to create witnesses, exceeded every quantifiable target. At the end of 30 days, Kent extended the PIP another 30, claiming insufficient progress. It was obvious what was happening. They were building documentation to fire me for cause, hoping to undermine the lawsuit. Diana added wrongful termination claims to the complaint. Let them fire you, she said. It strengthens our case exponentially. I trusted her, but living under constant threat of termination while supporting a family was exhausting. My wife Rachel was supportive but worried. What if we lose? She asked one night. Then I find another job, I said. But we won't lose. We have the truth. The breakthrough came in September. Diana deposed Pauline Frost, and under oath, Pauline couldn't maintain the corporate line. Faced with emails showing deliberate wage suppression, she admitted that cost containment had been a factor in compensation decisions. Admitted that new hire salaries were set at market rate, while internal raises were deliberately kept lower. Tried to justify it by claiming the company needed to balance multiple priorities, and that employees who were unhappy could explore other options. Diana didn't let up. So your position is that loyal employees who built this company should quit if they want fair pay? Pauline hesitated. That's not what I said. But it's what you meant, isn't it? You deliberately paid them less, knowing they were unlikely to leave, so you could afford higher salaries for new hires. You exploited their loyalty. Pauline's face went pale. I want to take a break, she said. The deposition transcript was devastating. Diana filed it as Exhibit M. By October, CorePath's legal position was collapsing. Their attorneys requested settlement talks. We met in a neutral conference room. Downtown, Dalbos, me, Jeremy, Leslie, Chris, Diana, and our legal team on one side, CorePath's 3 attorneys on the other. They opened with an offer, $12,000 in back pay per plaintiff, salary adjustments to $125,000, and confidential settlement terms. Diana didn't even blink. $32,000 in back pay per plaintiff, salary adjustments to $140,000 with guaranteed 3% annual increases for 3 years, written policy changes requiring salary band transparency, and no confidentiality clause. Your clients deliberately underpaid experienced employees for years. This is what accountability costs. The lead attorney shook his head. That's not reasonable. Diana smiled coldly. Neither is paying loyal employees $17,000 less than new hires. We can continue in court if you prefer. I have 6 more depositions scheduled, and I'm told 3 business reporters are very interested in covering the trial. Your call. The negotiation lasted 6 hours. We broke twice, once for lunch and once when their side caucused privately for 90 minutes. In the end, we settled for $28,000 in back pay per plaintiff, immediate salary adjustments to $137,000, guaranteed annual raises matching inflation for 5 years, and a commitment from CorePath to implement transparent salary bands within 6 months. No confidentiality clause. We could talk about the case freely. Total cost to CorePath, approximately $560,000 in back pay and raises, plus their legal fees. Diana shook hands with their lead counsel, then turned to us. "This is a good outcome," she said. "You held them accountable. That matters." I looked at Jeremy, Leslie, and Chris. We'd started this terrified of losing our jobs. We'd ended it with justice and better pay. "Thank you," I said to Diana. She nodded. "You did the hard part. You spoke up when it would have been easier to stay quiet." We signed the settlement agreement that afternoon. It would take effect immediately. The company-wide email went out the next morning. Richard Carmichael announced the settlement in carefully worded corporate language. CorePath Industries is pleased to have reached an amicable resolution with several employees regarding compensation practices. As part of our ongoing commitment to equity and transparency, we will be implementing comprehensive salary reviews and establishing clear compensation bands across all departments. We value every member of our team and remain committed to fair and competitive pay. It was sanitized corporate speak, but everyone knew what it meant. They'd been caught, and they'd paid for it. Over the next week, 4 other analysts approached Diana about similar cases. She took 3 of them. The pressure on CorePath intensified. By mid-November, the company announced a firm-wide compensation audit and promised adjustments by year-end. It wasn't just our case anymore. It was a reckoning. I worked at CorePath for 3 more months after the settlement. The atmosphere was poisonous. Kent Ashford barely spoke to me. Pauline Frost avoided me entirely. Several colleagues who'd stayed silent during the lawsuit suddenly wanted to be friendly, seeking details about the settlement. I kept my head down and did my work. In January, I accepted a position at Meridian Financial Group as a senior analyst at $148,000, more than I'd been making at CorePath even after the settlement adjustment. They'd recruited me specifically because of the lawsuit. "We want people who stand up for themselves," the hiring manager said during my interview, "and we want to make sure you're compensated fairly from day one." I gave CorePath 3 weeks' notice. Kent accepted it with barely concealed relief. My exit interview with HR was perfunctory. They asked if there was anything they could do to make me stay. I said, "You could have done that 3 years ago by paying me what I was worth." They had no response. My last day was January 19th. I cleaned out my desk, returned my badge, and walked out of CorePath Industries for the final time. Jeremy Wu had left 2 weeks earlier for a position at a tech firm. Leslie Park was interviewing. Chris Brennan decided to stay. His settlement pay had finally brought him to a comfortable salary, and he was 3 years from retirement. I understood. We'd all made different choices, but we'd made them from a position of knowledge and power, not ignorance and exploitation. As I drove away from the CorePath building, I thought about Derek Thornton's offer letter, about that morning when the printer jammed and I found out what I was really worth to my employer. 8 years of loyalty had meant nothing to them, but 4 months of courage had meant everything. I'd made them justify every dollar. I'd exposed their system. I'd walked away with my dignity and better prospects. That was worth more than any paycheck. The ripple effects continued long after I left. 3 months into my new job at Meridian, I got a LinkedIn message from a woman named Olivia Stanton, who worked at a competing firm. "I saw what you did at CorePath," she wrote. "We're dealing with the same thing here. Different company, same playbook. Would you be willing to talk?" I called her that evening. She described a situation almost identical to mine. Experienced employees systematically underpaid, new hires brought in at premium salaries, retaliation against anyone who questioned it. I connected her with Diana Kensington. 2 months later, her company settled a similar lawsuit for $840,000. Then I heard from someone at a consulting firm in the same industry, then someone from a financial services company 2 states away. The pattern was everywhere, and CorePath's very public loss had created a roadmap for challenging it. Diana told me she'd taken on 11 new wage discrimination cases in the 6 months following our settlement, all referrals from people who'd heard about CorePath. "You started something," she said. "These companies thought they could hide behind non-disclosure and employee shame. You proved they couldn't." 6 months later, CorePath's regional office closed. The wage scandal had compounded with other management failures, and the company restructured, laying off 40% of staff. Kent Ashford was let go. Pauline Frost resigned before they could fire her. Richard Carmichael survived, but took a significant pay cut. I heard about it through LinkedIn and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a distant recognition that systems built on exploitation eventually collapse. I was thriving at Meridian, leading a team, making good money, and working for people who valued experience. My wife and I took the kids to Hawaii with part of my settlement back pay. My daughter asked me why I seemed happier. "Because I stopped accepting less than I deserve," I told her. She nodded like that made perfect sense. We spent a week on the beach, and I didn't think about CorePath once. That's when I knew I'd won. Not because they'd paid me, because I'd stopped letting them define my worth. If you enjoyed this, UTM, I'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.